Okay, welcome to topic 4, lecture 2. And in this lecture, we're going to take a look at the sociological theories. Okay, so far we've looked at the choice theory and we've looked at the trait theories. And now we're going to look at the sociological theories. And when the sociological theories are asked the question why people engage in criminal behavior, they say that criminals are a product of society. They're not a product of nature. So maybe engaging in crime is a choice, a rational choice, or maybe you don't have free choice, but it's a product of your biology, your brain chemistry, your biochemistry, your genetic traits. But maybe there's a social factor that also helps us understand criminality. And sociological theory focuses on the role that society plays in criminal behavior. And I think you're going to find throughout the course of this chapter that no one theory alone does an adequate job of explaining criminal behavior. In fact, you're going to see that there's overlap when you get to the developmental theory. You're going to see that there's a lot of overlap between developmental theory and trait theory, and in particular sociological theory. And so, I think as you're going to find by the end of this chapter that no one theory does the best job explaining criminal behavior, and to get a truly sort of comprehensive understanding of why people engage in crimes, it's best to know and think about all of the different theories. So, sociological theory is divided into two main branches. And so there are two main sociological branches in criminology. One is known as social structure theory. And in this theory, the focus is on crime being a byproduct of poverty, that high poverty areas create conditions that produce and support criminality. Okay. The other branch within sociological theory is known as social process theories. And here they argue that the root cause of crime can't be found solely in poverty, that interpersonal interactions and relationships with other humans influence people's behaviors, either in a positive pro-social way or in a negative antisocial or asocial criminal way. So let's take a look at each of these branches in more detail. So let's take a look at the social structure theories that focus on poverty. Now, your textbook does a good job of describing poverty in the United States. More than 47 million Americans live in poverty. Poverty is defined as a family of four that has an earning of $28,000 per year or less. And sort of think about that. I mean, a lot of people would find that it's difficult to survive on an income of $28,000 a year just for one person or two people. But imagine one person and three children, or two people and two children, just to get an idea of what that would be like to live at that income level. And as we also know that poverty has a disproportionately affects people of color. So your textbook talks about how people of color have a lower family median income than white Americans, and they have higher levels of unemployment. And your textbook talks about some reasons for why that is, but you can take a sociology class to learn more about sort of endemic poverty as it relates to racial inequality in the United States. And for those of you in this class who took my women's studies class last semester, I know there's some of you, I also want you to keep in mind what we've talked about, the feminization of poverty. When we talked about that, the group of people that's most likely to be in poverty are households that are headed by single women, family heads of households, okay? And so keep that in mind as we're sort of talking about the social structure theories. So your textbook talks about three different theories within the social structure theory that focus on poverty. The social disorganization theory is saying that crime is a product of the transitional neighborhood that is disorganized and plagued with problems that make an area ripe for crime. And so, like I said, I live in Milwaukee. And so, if you drive around within a 10-mile radius of Milwaukee, or maybe a 20-mile radius of Milwaukee, you can go from areas that have an incredibly high level of poverty and disorganization. And so, sort of thinking about the central city in Milwaukee around 27th and Center. And then, 15 minutes later, you can be in Mequon, right? Or in Whitefish Bay, or in, the western suburbs. And when you look at the neighborhoods and compare the neighborhoods, and you sort of think about the message that living in a neighborhood that is just completely decimated by poverty, you can sort of think about the messages that a person living in that neighborhood might get. That people are oftentimes renters in poorer neighborhoods, and so that they are dependent upon their landlord to fix broken windows or to remove snow or to mow lawns. If you do own a home in a poorer area, for a variety of reasons, you may not have enough money to make the necessary repairs to keep your home up. But when you live in a more affluent area, a lot more homeowners and a lot more income to make sure that the place where you live is kept up. So just think about the message that communicates to people who live in poorer areas. You might feel as if you are not really a part of the American dream, that you look around and you see a lot of disintegration. You don't see services that are actually like working in your neighborhood. And there might be a sense of hopelessness that comes with that. And so the social disorganization theory is that when you live in a neighborhood that is plagued by poverty, that you feel disconnected from the broader society, and that you may not feel like that, like, why follow the rules, why follow the law, because it seems like the rules governing making sure that communities are happy and healthy and thriving don't seem to apply to my neighborhood. And so it might seem that you might have a sense of lawlessness, or a sense of that it really doesn't matter because there's this sense of hopelessness. So I might as well engage in crime because what do I have to lose? Your textbook also talks about the culture of poverty, or the deviant values perspective, that when poor neighborhoods seem, and oftentimes are, separated out from the rest of a more thriving or affluent community, that people that live in poverty can create a separate society with separate norms that conflict with mainstream values and norms. And so in mainstream, more affluent areas or more functional areas, that the mainstream norms are that you go to school and you graduate and you go to college and you get a job. And if you go to school, you will get a job that pays well, and then you'll be able to get married and provide for your family. Well, if you live in an area that's very poor, you might not, your schools might not be properly funded, and you might not feel like you're getting an adequate education. And that even if you got the education, that you wouldn't be able to get a job that makes ends meet. And so it could very well be that going to school or getting a job is for those who've been duped by the system. It's like, like, why go to school? Because they're just lying to you that it's going to result in an outcome that's going to improve your life. And so don't go to school, and find another way to make ends meet, a more profitable way to make ends meet. And sometimes that could be involved in criminal activity. And then finally, your textbook talks about strain. That when people, that strain is this idea that all people want to adopt sort of the goals of conventional society. Getting an education that matters, that you can use to get a good job, that you can get a good job and you can provide for your family. But that you want those things, but because of living in poverty and a poor community, you're unable to achieve those things. And so that results in frustration and possible antisocial behavior. So it's sort of like you're trying to achieve those goals, but you're coming up against a disordered and poor infrastructure, a poor community, and that you just get frustrated because you want to achieve those goals, but you cannot. And that frustration can play itself out in criminal and asocial behavior. And this is a graph that shows you strain. And so, on the one hand, it has the sources of strain, failure to achieve goals, a disjunction of expectations and achievements. You have these expectations of things you want to achieve, but that you're not able to achieve those things. That there might not be positive stimulus encouraging you to achieve your goals, etc., etc. And that results in that strain results in anger, frustration, disappointment, and fear, and then those emotional states can result in antisocial behavior that can link to criminal behavior, drug abuse, violence, dropping out, feeling disconnected. Okay, so that's just sort of a graphical description of strain. The other branch of sociological theory is known as the social process theories. And that from this perspective, they say, look, a lot of people are born into poverty and they don't become criminals. And that's true. And so poverty alone cannot explain why people engage in criminal behaviors. And so that society does play a role, but it's not that society creates poverty and poverty creates criminals, but rather that criminality is a product of the way an individual is socialized. And so social learning theory is a part of the social processes theory, that people learn criminal behavior from their relationships. And it doesn't matter whether you come from a rich family, a middle income family, or a poor family, the people that you hang out with can teach you values and can teach you and encourage, and you can learn behaviors from the people that you hang out with. And so the more positive your network is, the more pro-social your behavior is going to be, but the more deviant your network is. If you're seeing your dad or you're seeing your peers, you're seeing your extended family engage in deviant behavior, then you're learning that behavior, and then you may engage in that deviant behavior as well. So crime is learned. Social control theory is one of my favorite theories. And this theory is that everybody has a potential to be a criminal, right? It doesn't matter if you're a man, woman, rich, poor, black, white, everybody has the potential to be a criminal. But it's the bonds that we make with society that prevent people from violating social rules. And that when those bonds are really strong, then you're going to stay on the pro-social path, right? But when those bonds to society are frayed, then you're more likely to engage in antisocial and criminal behavior. So, for example, you could take a person, right, and they're like, the person is sort of in the middle of it, and if they have strong connections to their family, they have strong role models that are saying, like, if you don't come home at a certain time, your mom or dad will say, where the hell were you? Why didn't you come home? We have dinner at this time. You're disappointing us, right? And then it's kind of, you have a strong bond there. So that person is sort of like, they don't want to let that person down. You have a strong relationship with your teachers, right? You don't show up to school. And then when you do show up to school, or they call you and say, where were you? Why weren't you there? And so there's a strong social bond. You can have a strong social bond to a religious community, going to church, your pastor or your minister. You can have a strong social bond to a social group that you might belong to, a boys and girls club, or even your friends, right? Your friends are saying, we were going to go out. Where were you? Holding you accountable. And even a job, right? Your boss, that they expected you to be there. Don't let us down. But when those bonds fray, right? You don't show up and no parents there to tell you, like, hold you to account. You don't show up to school and nobody seems to give a shit. Excuse my language. You don't have a job, so you don't have a boss to disappoint. Maybe you don't have any connections to social institutions or to religious institution to kind of keep you on the straight and narrow. So, I think social control theory is really interesting because it says that anybody has the capacity to fall into asocial behavior, but people also have the capacity to be kept on pro-social behavior, right? As long as we keep those bonds to society at strong. And, as a political scientist, I think democratic society can play a big role in that. That there's these values that bind us together as Americans, and that we live up to those values. And we don't want to disappoint people by not following through on the values of liberty and treating people equally, and being engaged in the democratic process, right? So those can be like bonds that we have to our democratic society that can keep us engaging in pro-social behavior. And then finally, there's social reaction or labeling theory. And it's the view that society produces criminals by stigmatizing them. And we talked about this in the non-interventionist perspective, that if you label somebody as a criminal, then they're going to make good on that label. And sometimes those labels actually have profound real world consequences. If you're labeled a felon, then you have to check the box when you fill out a job application. Felony convictions oftentimes prohibit you from getting a student aid or other kinds of socially beneficial aid. And so there's real world consequences from those labels and stigmas as well. This is a graph of the social control model. And so in the middle, you have attachments to family, friends, and communities. You have commitments to your family, to your career, to future goals. You have certain beliefs of being honest, moral, patriotic, and that you're involved in certain things like school activities, religious groups, social clubs, etc. And that when you don't have strong connections to those features, then you're going to engage in criminal behavior. But when you maintain those strong connections, then you're more likely to engage in pro-social, non-criminal behaviors. Now, in years past, when I teach this class face-to-face, and we could have done it this semester if I chose to, but I decided that we were going to watch other documentaries besides this. But I'd have students watch this cool documentary called The Interrupters. And The Interrupters is a documentary that looks at the south side of Chicago and the development of the ceasefire program. And what the ceasefire program is it puts people in the community, and usually they're former gang members, but they're not gang members anymore. And they're put in the community to disrupt harmful, like, social interactions that are going on. And so they go into the community and they try to interrupt violence through mediation, by developing strong bonds with potential like youth who are engaging in criminal behavior, and getting strong bonds with other people that can lead them to see the benefits from turning their back on a criminal lifestyle and engaging in more productive behaviors. We're not going to watch this documentary this semester, but I've used it in the past as an illustration of the social structure and the social processes theory. I'll put a link to The Interrupters. It's a free movie that you can watch via PBS. I'll put a link to that movie in our Topic 4 module, so that if you want to, you can take a look at it. It's a really cool capturing of some really inspiring individuals who are working hard to end crime within Chicago. In the middle there is Amina Matthews, the woman there with, she's Muslim, and so she has a head covering on. But she used to be involved in a gang, and she's actually the daughter of a renowned gang leader in Chicago whose name was Jeff Fort. And she turned her back on the criminal lifestyle, and it's just amazing to look at the influencing that she's having in people in that community, as well as trying to influence and keep young people from continuing on a criminal lifestyle. So I'll put the link to the movie there if you're so inclined to watch it. Okay, thanks for listening, and have a good evening.